You're listening to the best of the Martha Zoller Show. To hear the full show each day, tune in to AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN or log in to accesswdun.com and click the Listen Live button from 9 to 11 Monday through Friday. It is the Martha Zoller Show. We are very happy to be here with Pastor Rod Huey. He is joining me today on a very special day because we have Senator Raphael Warnock with us today. Welcome, sir.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
It was a long time coming, but I'm so happy you're here.
Good morning. Great to be here.
It is great. It is great to have you here. All right. So you're in Gainesville. First of all, tell us a little bit about why you're in Gainesville today.
Well, it's great to be back in Gainesville. And look, wonderful things are happening here in the city. Later today, I'm going to be visiting the hospital, the Gainesville Health Center. And I'm very focused on health care. That's been a passion of mine long before I went to the Senate. I recently was able to pass, last summer we passed my bill, which capped the cost of insulin for folks who are on Medicare. I'm trying to get that done for everybody. But I'm also very focused on the crisis of maternal health. There are entirely too many women dying just trying to bring a child into the world. And Georgia is near the top of the list. And there was a recent study that showed that 89% of the maternal deaths in this state were preventable. Think about that. And so I've got legislation on this that I have introduced with Senator Rubio, and it's something I'll remain focused on. Our maternal mortality rates are criminally high. The good news is we can do something about it. That's something government can actually fix if we'll get focused on it.
You know, healthcare is a really important issue. And, of course, the ACA has been very successful in getting more people insured. But in the time that it's been in place, the costs have gone up pretty significantly. And for somebody like me, I'm a self-employed person over a certain age. I'm not Medicare age yet, but I'm almost there.
You're legal, though, right?
I am. I'm over 55. I'll be 64 in a couple of weeks. I'm paying about what a mortgage payment is for my health insurance premium because I'm self-employed and God's been good to us. We make a pretty good salary, and so I don't qualify for any of that. I'm not saying you need to fix that because I can pay my health care, but I think this insulin thing is extremely important because what has happened is costs of things have still gone up more than they should, and I think that's something we need to work on.
Oh, we certainly need to get a handle on the cost of prescription drugs. And what we are seeing in Washington is the influence, the outsized voice of big pharma and interest groups in our policy. And which is why it's a crazy thing for Pastor Rod to decide to go and serve in the United States Senate. But I've been focused on these healthcare issues for years. And so rather than simply fighting for good laws, now I'm able to write them. I'm glad we're able to cap the cost of insulin. That's awesome. But I'll tell you, Georgia needs to expand Medicaid. We've got 640,000 Georgians in the health care coverage gap. We're one of only 10 states still digging in our heels. I think that's a mistake.
We did expand Medicaid as of July 1st to certain sectors.
Yeah, we've got over 600,000 Georgians. That's a drop in the bucket. The program that's being pushed forward right now, and as a result of that, in my view, we've seen 10 hospitals close in a decade. And when you talk about the people in the gap, I think it's important to stress that you really are talking about the working poor.
Right.
And I want to keep that in mind because these are people who are not poor enough to get Medicaid, but they can't afford health insurance, as you point out, which is an issue that a lot of people struggle with. They're in the gap. And we have left them in the gap, even though in the American Rescue Plan, I was able to convince my caucus to put in the bill additional sweeteners to make it even more attractive for Georgia to expand Medicaid. And when I say expand, we're not talking about a new program. We're saying give Georgians access to the money they're already spending in their taxes. Our refusing to expand Medicaid doesn't get that money back into the pockets of Georgians. That just means they're subsidizing health care in other states while their hospitals are closing, mostly in rural areas throughout Georgia. And working people don't have a floor to get basic health care, which I believe as a pastor is a human right.
Well, this is something that I was wanting to talk to you about, and I'm glad you brought it up. And thank you so much for the hard work that you've already put in. I'm one of those people you're talking about as far as that need insulin, and that's on medicines, different types of medicines, and that was some of the medicines we were looking at. Just one of my medicines was $600, just one, and we were like, Lord, how in the world? But then there were programs that have just come out that we didn't know anything about that helped us get them. And we was like, wow, thank you so much. Thank you for what you're doing. It's a lot of us out there that are not able to afford insurance. Martha and I have talked about this. My wife, we've talked, that's not able to afford a house payment for insurance. And just to get what we thought was insurance, which, here it is over $400 a month, and we still didn't have anything.
So here's why I've focused on insulin. You say, well, diabetes is one disease, but $1 out of $4 in our healthcare system is spent on people with diabetes. $1 out of $4 in our healthcare system spent on people with diabetes. So if we can get some control over this, not only will it help people like Pastor Rod and others, I think it will help to impact the overall cost of our healthcare system. Insulin's been around 100 years, a century. And when it was invented, the patent was sold for $1. There's no reason for insulin to be expensive. It's expensive because too often in Washington, D.C., it's the moneyed interests. It's people who are well-connected and well-financed who get their way. And what we saw on this insulin fight is that as I and others began engaged on this issue in the public sector, it did also impact the private sector. So we are starting to see insurance companies, pharmaceutical companies, cap the cost of their insulin. And so I think that's that dance between the public and the private. But we have to center the concerns of ordinary people. I had a woman who was my guest at the State of the Union address, and she, as a graduate student, literally spent hours and hours on Facebook and on social media connecting with strangers in dimly lit parking lots to get not illegal drugs, but insulin, rationing insulin, people passing on insulin from dead relatives. If you need insulin, you need insulin. And I have seen up close as a pastor the impact of unmanaged diabetes, the amputations, the kidney failure, having to go on dialysis, the leading cause of blindness. Mm-hmm. And I'm deeply honored that I get to represent all Georgians on this and so many other issues.
And you go back to even the results of COVID. I mean, if you look at the impact diabetes had on your ability to survive COVID, it was one of the biggest factors. So It was a huge issue. And one thing you and I might agree on is that my big problem with, I'm not one of these big pharma people. I'm not anti-pharmaceutical companies. I think they've done great work. My problem with the pharmaceutical companies is they now pay more on advertising than they do on research and development. Right. I can defend them when they're spending the money on research and development because, do you know what I mean? Because we are the last market left where we don't have fixed prices. And so I understand that from a capitalist standpoint. What bothers me is it's not they're spending so much money on research and development. They are, but more on advertising.
Yeah, I mean, they're literally advertising drug. I mean, we all see these ads.
Yes.
And they're telling you to ask your doctor to ask about a drug.
Yeah, I mean, my husband's an old primary care physician. He's retired from his practice, but he's the jail doc at Hall County, and it's a real mission because a lot of these folks have never seen a doctor before, and he's done that. But I mean, he's very old school about that kind of stuff for sure. Let's talk a little bit about. You said we can fix the mother mortality rate as well as infant mortality rate. How can we do that? How can government do that?
Well, look, it's the reason why I work with Marco Rubio on this issue, because, regardless of your politics, this is something that we all ought to be able to agree on and work on. So I have introduced something called the Kira Johnson Act. It's named after a black woman, and I want to encourage your readers to just Google her name, Kira, K-I-R-A, Johnson Act. And while it shouldn't matter because it's a human being, a child of God, this is a well-traveled, well-educated woman who had a very vibrant life, very healthy. And 12 hours after she gave birth to her son, she died in a hospital begging for care, asking them to respond. 12 hours later, she literally just died, bled to death in the hospital. And what we've seen, what we have seen is that there is clearly implicit bias. And I know some folks don't want to hear that, but you got to respect the data. Black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die than their white sisters, even when they have the insurance. So it's not just a class issue, even when they have the income. And so Marco Rubio and I have gotten together. We don't agree on a whole range of things to say, well, we can't countenance this kind of bias. These maternal mortality rates for women in general in states like Georgia are criminally high. They're especially acute for African-American women. And so my bill, the Kira Johnson Act, supports grassroots organizations that are responding to this while also investing in the kind of research and bias training that we need so that women don't have to feel like when they're going into the hospital to have a baby, they've got one foot in the grave and one on a banana peel.
We have one question. We had one question that came in from a caller related to immigration. What is your view on the level of illegal immigration that's coming in right now and what we need to do about it?
We have to secure the border, and we have to give people a dignified path to citizenship. We are the land of immigrants. America is great, not in spite of its diversity, but because of it. And I think that it is unfortunate that this issue gets politicized. But I'll tell you, as I move across Georgia, as I move across North Georgia, and I talk to leaders in business, they know that we've got to get our act together on immigration. When you talk about labor, the labor force, the jobs that need to be filled, the people who come here to get educated, then we send them back with all of their training. We need to get our arms around this, and I think there's a common sense path. And I think the reason we haven't done it is not because it's so complicated. It's the politics. It's the politics. And it's a strange thing for somebody to say who's in office, but it's the reason why I'm not in love with politics. I tolerate politics in order to do good work.
I mean, it is one of the biggest problems, I think, with politics today is the fact that you have these caucuses, okay? And you were elected, I don't remember what it was, 51, 49, 52, 48, something like that. So you're not going to be 100% with your caucus. But I bet, and I don't want to say what's been said to you, but I know other senator friends of mine have said, you get called into a room. If you don't toe the line, we're not going to help you get reelected. And I know it happens on the Republican side. I bet it happens on the Democrat side, too. And we got to get past that and try to do more together. And I believe we can. I'm an eternal optimist. I believe conservative values are the best for this country, but I also believe that we can work together on things as children of God.
I'm proud of the fact that I'm the 18th most bipartisan senator in the Senate, according to an institute that's named in honor of a former Republican senator. So I've tried to focus on the things that we can agree on, which is why I've worked with Republicans to do everything from helping Georgia farmers get their products to market to trying to cap the cost of insulin. And
had the best commercials ever. You can say Christmas lights and puppies, and people know you're talking about Raphael Warnock. Even though you let that dog lead you a little bit in that one ad.
Well, I thought that was brilliant. Well, I was like, Lord, don't let the dog trip him up.
Reverend Senator Warnock, thank you so much for being with us today. We have a whole list of questions we wanted to get to today, but we had limited time today. But we'd love for you to come back and do a town hall with us. We would love that.
I will do it.
It's where North Georgia comes to talk. It's the Martha Zoller Show on AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN.
Joining us right now is Labor Commissioner Bruce Thompson. And when Bruce Thompson asked for your vote and then was elected, he said he was going to audit the Department of Labor and that he was going to run it like a business. And he's discovered some things, and he's going to tell us about it today. Bruce, welcome to the program.
Good morning, Martha. How are you?
Good. So tell us about this audit and what you found.
Well, sure. Just like what you just said, when you come into a new opportunity, you look at the books, you look at the cash flow, you look at the assets and the revenue streams to try and determine how you're going to accomplish your mission. And we started looking after being presented with a little bit of money that was somewhere that didn't make a lot of sense. We did an internal investigation with our legal team, uncovered significant ambiguous funds, brought in our state auditor, and we discovered $105 million that was meticulously moved around in the Department of Labor that should have been transmitted to the state treasury. Started in 2014, and it continued all the way up until I had it transmitted last Friday.
Wow. So where did this money come from?
So when employers pay their premium fund, they pay for the employers, they pay it quarterly, they file it quarterly. The state allowed what we call the administrative assessment fee, which means if, let's just say you pay in $1,000, there was a very small piece that could be identified that when it went over to the state treasury, it would be returned back for operational expenses. And in the report, because the state auditors are interim report to us, it details that the previous administration was frustrated by not getting the appropriations they wanted, so they decided to only submit a portion of that and keep some for themselves. Then when an employer does not file in a timely manner, there are penalties and interest on that. That they kept all of it. And they commingled the three funds together. They hid it in the trust fund. So until the time during 2020 when the trust fund was being depleted because of COVID, they moved it out of there for fear it looked like apparently that they were concerned that it would be utilized for paying out benefits, and moved it over into a non-interest bearing account, which for $679, the people of Georgia lost out on interest on that money. So millions of dollars in lost interest as well.
So what is going to happen with this? I mean, is this criminal, what was done? Is this, what will happen next?
Sure. It's an ongoing investigation. Listen, this is not political to me. This is exactly what I campaigned on. It's what I do. And the decisions will be with other agencies on what happens, but we're far from the end of this. There's a lot to be investigated. There's a lot of questions that are still unanswered. The detail of transactions were being done on an Excel paper spreadsheet. So, yeah, a lot of questions.
So will this money have to be given back to the state? Is it owed to the state? And again, the Department of Labor is a part of the state. But does this money have to be moved out of the Department of Labor?
Well, constitutionally, all agencies are required to transmit funds or monies that it collects. And so it was required constitutionally to be sent over in a timely manner, which outlines monthly. And we did not do that. We submitted some, kept some for ourselves. And when we got to the point where we're getting close to the end of the fiscal year, which would have been last Friday, we transmitted that money over to the state treasury where it belonged. And we'll continue to do that in accordance with the Constitution on a regular basis while we investigate this.
And obviously, I'm sure you've got some staff that is from the previous administration. Have you been able to determine who, if anybody, is still working there that made some of these decisions?
Well, I would tell you the people of the Department of Labor, the employees that have been here, are great people. They work tirelessly trying to make sure that people got the benefits and the service they needed through the pandemic and in other times. This seemed to be an orchestrated effort at the top. So the rank and file and the hardworking people that are in career centers and at headquarters, most of them had no idea. But certainly during an investigatory period, it will be able to vet out those, if any others are involved. But I feel very confident with the people around me right now that they believe in what I believe, and that is let's run transparent government like the oath that I took. when I became the constitutional officer. This is going to be a transparent agency moving forward. We're going to do the right thing. And along with the General Assembly and the executive branch, we're confident that modernization and investment in this will prevent this from ever happening again.
Bruce Thompson, Labor Commissioner, thank you so much for being with me today.
Putting the talk in news talk. It's the Martha Zoller Show on AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN.
Joining us on the phone is Representative Barry Loudermilk. And Barry is one of my favorite people because he doesn't search for the limelight. He gets the work done. And when he speaks about something, I pay attention because he doesn't grab the microphone every time something is happening. Barry Loudermilk, how are you?
Martha, it's good to be with you. Good to talk to you.
And I'm sure there's people that want you to do more of that, grabbing the microphone, right? But I love the fact that you are thoughtful, you think about things, and you don't get involved in a media. You're working all the time, but you're not out there trying to grab the limelight, and I like that. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate that. It is a challenge these days because, in today's environment, political success is often measured by volume versus achievement. And so, but on that note, I actually had my friend Thomas Massey, who is on Jim Jordan's weaponization committee, and he complimented us on that. He said, look, you guys are getting so much done because you're not running to the media every time that you get one piece of information. He said the problem we have is we have so many members in the investigation that when we get a little tidbit of information, it's a dash to see who can get to the camera first.
So tell us about this. What are you doing related to oversight? Because a lot of people don't understand that. How does that work? And then what are your biggest concerns as you've started this process?
Well, when it comes to oversight, Congress is given the constitutional responsibility of accountability of the executive branch. And we do that through various oversight committees. We have a general government oversight and accountability committee, but each committee generally has an oversight committee for their jurisdiction. The exception to that until this year was the House Administration Committee. Our jurisdiction is Capitol Hill and federal elections. I mean, if it's a Capitol Hill jurisdiction, includes Capitol Police, the Library of Congress, Smithsonian's, the Botanic Gardens, the operations of the House and the Senate, the construction. I mean, everything dealing with Capitol Hill is in our jurisdiction. This is the one committee that until this year never had an oversight subcommittee. It was always a smaller committee. So the Speaker this time decided that we needed to have an oversight subcommittee, which I had advocated for as well as some others. And he appointed me chairman of that oversight subcommittee. And he personally, when he brought me in to talk about it, he said, the two things that I want you to have your focus on is looking into the security failure of January 6th, because the Select Committee never did that. They were supposed to. They never looked at the security failure itself. All of their focus was on tying Donald Trump to the attack on the Capitol. And he said the other aspect is looking into the January 6th Select Committee and how they operated, because they had a huge budget, $18.5 million, and all that they produced was basically a manifesto against Donald Trump and Republicans. And so that is where our focus has been. And, of course, our key focus has been on the security failure at the Capitol, but that has also catapulted us into looking at the so-called evidence the January 6th committee collected and was supposed to hand over to us.
So I've heard this number that there was supposedly 4 gigabytes or whatever of data, and all you really got was 2.4. So how is that process gone? Because you're missing a lot of the data. And what really piqued my interest was there were a lot of these interviews, these depositions that were used in the hearings that were televised, but the whole interviews were not made available to you. Correct.
So when, as the January 6th Select Committee was coming to its end at the end of the last Congress, Kevin McCarthy, who was going to presumably be Speaker, as well as our ranking Republican on House Administration, sent letters to the committee reemphasizing the House rules and basically saying you have to keep everything. It has to be archived. You have to preserve everything, and it will be handed over to the House Administration Committee. So that process is they have to preserve it. They turn it over to the House clerk, and then the clerk hands it to us. So when I took the reins, we finally got all the information. What we expected was to receive a database and some hard copies, because all these committees that do investigations, you get these databases to where everything is put into the database. And so your work is done on computer. Even though you have printed documents, you have depositions and subpoenas, all that stuff is digitized, and all of your communications, everything is handled through that database. So we expected to get a database. We didn't get that. We got about 2 million printed pages of information and about little more than 2 terabytes of digital information. Most of that digital information was just digital copies, PDFs, if you will, of the printed documents. There were a few videos of some body cam footage. Basically, some of the stuff that they used in their Hollywood production hearings.
Did they deliver 2 million pages to you?
Yes, we had about 2 million printed pages.
Oh, my gosh.
And so nothing was indexed. There was no table of contents. It was boxes full of stuff. So obviously it takes us a while to go through to figure out what we have. As we're going, we're figuring out, look, we've got a lot of stuff, but there's information we don't have. So the select committee was broken up into 3 teams. You had a red team, a green team, and a blue team. Red team's goal, they were to look at tying Donald Trump to the attack on the Capitol. Well, their goal was to investigate that. Their mission was to tie him to it. That's what they wanted to do. That's the narrative they wanted. Green team was looking at the money, who funded all this. The blue team was supposed to be looking at the actual security failure of the Capitol. Well, we start realizing we don't have anything from the blue team. There's nothing. It's like the blue team didn't exist. We didn't have anything from the green team. A lot of information for the red team. But then we started realizing after an attorney called me and said, look, because we're giving access to defense attorneys to this information because they should be able to have access to defend their clients. And so they're looking for the actual video recording of the deposition that they did. We had copies of the deposition, but we didn't have video recordings. And the committee actually videotaped every deposition and interview. Well, we don't have any of that, but they were supposed to preserve that because they actually used clips of some of those interviews and depositions in the hearings. And anything that you use that you advance by the committee has to be preserved. So we're missing that. We're missing blue team information. Then we happen to come across a couple of letters. We did not have these letters. These letters were not preserved and given to us. We found them through another source, and it was letters from the chair of the January 6th committee, Benny Thompson, to the White House and the Department of Homeland Security, letters saying, we're sending you documents. We're returning documents to you. So they actually physically took documents we were supposed to keep and sent them to the Biden administration. That was that's in violation as well. So we know that there's nothing from Blue Team. We have these documents that have been sent to the White House and Homeland Security and the video depositions. We know that that's documents that were supposed to be handed over to us that we don't have. But we still don't know the entirety of what information that they may have sent to other places.
So what's next, Barry? How are we going to move forward on this?
Well, I've communicated with Chairman Thompson. I sent him a letter several weeks ago outlining what we knew we didn't have, asking him where they are, why didn't you keep them, why didn't we get them? And he basically wrote back and summarizing is, we didn't have to, and we determined what we wanted to pass along to you. So we gave them plenty of opportunity to work with us. They didn't, so we went public with it, that we're missing this. We're hoping that this will bring some more people to help us.
I think what's ironic about this is we've got a big controversy related to documents that former President Trump kept, for documents that Mike Pence kept, documents that President Biden kept. And that, in one case, has led to some charges. In these other two, we don't know yet what's going to happen. But that's about separating documents out, not handling documents in the appropriate way. This sounds like a case like that on steroids, where there was a whole bunch of documents. It's recent. It's not like they're 10 years old and you don't know where they are. It's a recent thing, and they still don't have all the documents together. And look, if you're going to make the kind of allegations that the January 6th committee made, then you ought to have the documentation to back it up.
Exactly. And we do know now that even since the article ran, we know now that there were some documents that were requested by the Department of Justice. So we're asking the Department of Justice what documents were sent to you to see if, maybe it could be documents we have copies of. We don't know. But I've already sent requests, I would say more demands to the White House and Homeland Security to return all of the documents that they received. As far as holding people accountable, yes, they need to be held accountable. My priority right now, though, is getting the information because the severity of whatever punitive action we take could be determined on what the type of documents are. And, if they selectively took documents that could exonerate people who have been indicted or the president or whatever, and those are the documents they sent away, then there's probably a lot more punishment in line than if it was just, videotapes of deposition.
It's local radio, and that's why you're listening. It's the Martha Zoller Show on AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN.
Welcome back to the Martha Zoller Show. It is always great to talk to Congressman Dan Crenshaw. It's been a while, but we're really glad to have him back. How are you, Dan?
Hey, I'm doing great. No, thanks for having me.
Sure. It is so wonderful. I got into your podcast about 3 months ago, and I have to tell you, it's one of the best things I've listened to in a really long time.
Oh, thanks so much. Yeah. Put a lot of work into that, and we got like 300 episodes. It's one of the things I actually really enjoy doing still. We always have some expert on talking about whatever subject, and you learn a lot. So, and I learn a lot when I do it. So, yeah, I love doing it. Thanks for saying that.
Well, it's in depth. I mean, I started trying to book you to get you back on again when I started listening to it. So I was going to talk to you about healthcare. I was going to talk to you about all kinds of issues. But this week, we're going to talk more about border security, because I know you've just been tapped on a congressional task force to help combat the Mexican drug cartels. And, we're kind of in this world of 21st century slavery. We've got fentanyl coming across the border at levels that we've never seen. We've got people that are either being trafficked for labor or trafficked for sex. And it's really a lot like slavery, because they're never going to be able to pay the money back. This has gotten so out of hand so quickly. Now, I know you're from Texas. You've dealt with these issues for a long time. And obviously, I live in Gainesville, Georgia, where we've had immigration issues for a very long time. But tell me about this task force, and then how can we get a handle on this?
Yeah, so the task force came out of our border security bill, because our border security bill that we passed in the House, HR 2, didn't deal with the cartels, right? It dealt with border security. If Democrats would make that law, and of course they won't, our border problems would be in a much better place, right? It was good legislation to that effect. But it didn't deal with the cartels. Now, these are related issues, but they're not the same. And so the task force was meant to really research and investigate what the problems are, what the vulnerabilities of the cartels are, and what kind of legislation we might push forward to combat them properly, with a real focus on fentanyl, because that's what's killing 80,000 Americans a year. It's new, right? The cartel issue is not new. Okay, major cartels, whether from Colombia or Mexico, have been around, in strength since the 90s. But what is new is their trafficking of fentanyl, and it is a problem we can solve, because only a couple cartels really do it. It is a problem we can solve, but we have to be willing to do it. We got to get the policy right. And so that's the point of the task force. And, we'll be taking trips down to Mexico, down to Colombia. I've already been on those trips myself. We'll be bringing in experts, and we're going to come up with the right policy solutions, hopefully in a bipartisan way. none of this works if it's not bipartisan. You know, it's really popular for a lot of Republicans to get up and make a lot of noise and talk about all the demands they're going to make. None of it really matters because you only have the House, right? You don't have the Senate, you don't have the presidency. So if you're not smart about this stuff, and you don't actually create a strategy where you can make some change, then I would argue you don't really care. You might care about getting people's attention, but you don't really care about the issues. So if we really care, we've got to actually make this bipartisan, and that's what I'm trying to do. Democrats maybe won't play along. We'll see, but you got to try. Well, it won't matter otherwise.
In Georgia, of course, after the 2020 election and runoff, we ended up with 2 Democratic senators, which we hadn't had in a very long time. And, we could get into the whole issue around that of people not getting back out and voting for the runoff and all of the other things that went along with that. But looking back doesn't help. Only looking forward does. But both of those senators, Ossoff and Warnock, have said we must secure our border, that we cannot fix this problem without securing the border. I had Democrats on my program today that said we have to secure the border. I've heard Democrat congressmen, some of your colleagues, talking about how they're going to lose seats in New York and other states because this border issue, whether you like what Greg Abbott did or not, he showed the rest of the country what the problem was by sending some of these illegal immigrants to other cities, these sanctuary cities. Because it's easy to say you're a sanctuary city when you're not dealing with the problem. And so we've got a big issue, but I think there's a window of opportunity to have a bipartisan movement on this. I just don't know how to get there.
That's why I focus on cartels, because I think Democrats say they want border security, but what they really mean is they want less chaos at the border. That's what they want, and we're still real far apart from each other when it comes to reforming our asylum laws that get taken advantage of and all that. Democrats basically want to shift a lot of the illegal immigration into legal immigration. So, I always take what they say with a grain of salt, and it's hard to find common ground there. But on cartels and on the fentanyl issue, I think there's more common ground. So that's the purpose behind the Cartel Task Force. We keep it focused on a national security issue, and it's a foreign policy issue, really. Because you've got the country of Mexico being overwhelmed by cartels. There's many states in Mexico, almost half really, is by our assessments, are fully controlled by cartel members or cartel money. It's a real problem. We cannot have that when they're one of our closest trading partners, closest allies, closest neighbor in the region. I mean, you just can't have a failed state on your hands. So it's a foreign policy, national security issue, and it's got to be bipartisan.
You're a veteran. I'm the daughter of a POW. I have members of my family that are serving in the Navy now. I know you're working hard on PTSD and how to treat that, and some things that were recently adopted into the NDAA. And this is a real important issue to me. My dad drank all his life. Okay, that's how he dealt with his PTSD. He was a functioning alcoholic, never missed a day of work, but you didn't really want to be around him at 8 o'clock at night. He thankfully dealt with his issues finally in his 70s. And we had the last 10 years of his life where it wasn't ever bad. You know what I mean, Dan? He was a great father. Yeah. He just had some demons that he never was able to deal with. And I'm thankful now that I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of soldiers, especially since the global war on terror. I traveled to Iraq twice. I've raised money. I've tried to be as involved as I can, and I understand my father so much better, which I'm so thankful for. So, tell me about that.
So what we were working on the NDAA, which is our annual military spending bill, was putting in there that they have to do clinical trials on certain psychedelics for treatment of PTSD and traumatic brain injuries. And why? Because what we've seen in some studies and in a lot of testimony from veterans who have gone to these clinics just outside the country is major positive outcomes from these therapies. One day of therapy completely changing their life, saving their marriage, stopping them from killing themselves, immediately stopping their drug addiction or alcohol addiction. I mean, immediately. It's real. I mean, you wouldn't really believe. I mean, you got to talk to these people to believe it, really. And so, this legislation would simply say, look, it's time for the Department of Defense to allow active duty service members to become part of these clinical trials. Let's study this. Let's understand it, and let's apply it, because it's already saved lives, but there's still that stigma attached to it. It's not widely available. It hasn't gone through the proper research and clinical trials. So let's do it. Let's actually do it.
No, I think it's the right thing to do. My husband's a primary care physician. He's been saying for years that we need to put these drugs in a classification that we can study them so that we can know what they do and what they don't do. Because he don't want to go out on a limb and prescribe something he doesn't know how it works, right? And you can't legally do it anyway. But you still want to know what the repercussions are, and it makes perfect sense. So I appreciate you doing that. One final question I just want to ask you is, and it's my pet peeve, it's the budget. Okay, we just can't seem to pass a budget on time. It doesn't look like we're going to for a while. It seems to me, I had an interview with John Lewis, the late congressman, a number of years ago, and I said, John, we might pick 20 things we could cut in the budget, and maybe we'd only agree on 3 of them, but why can't we start there? When are we going to get the budget process back on track?
Well, it depends on what kind of budget process you want. We could have a whole semester on budget process, and there are indeed classes that study it for a whole semester. And the history of it.
I've been there.
Why is it the way it is? Why are there 12 appropriations bills? Why? I mean, we kind of just came out that way. Okay, so they're based on subject matter. So what we've promised to do in the House is pass 12 separate appropriations bills. Okay, so we'll do that, I think. I mean, we'll probably have a government shutdown in the process, because there'll be a lot of fighting about it. That's okay. That's how politics is, and that's how legislation gets made, right? That kind of give and take. That'll go to the Senate, and then they'll put it all into one, because they'll have to negotiate it themselves as well. And as they negotiate it themselves, they take some things out of one appropriations bill in exchange for some changes in another appropriations bill. And that's how you get the big one. That's how you get the big appropriations bill, the omnibus that everybody just hates. But I tell you what, that's probably what the Senate's going to give us. And so and they're going to say, vote on it. And it will be based upon the 12 appropriations bills that we pass to them. But that's why it happens that way. I think there's way too much misinformation about how the process works. And, people are mad. They're not even sure why they're mad. Is it too much? Yeah, it's too much. But, the stuff we got to take out, you don't want to take out, right? Because it's entitlements. It's stuff that you like. But that's where most of the money is. So it's a longer conversation, as you know. For those of you out there who are really well informed about this stuff, how complicated it is. And then we get into these big fights over what amounts to almost a tiny percentage of the entire budget. People make big die on those hills to make themselves look cool and grab a headline or two. And that's what's all going to happen this year, just like it happens every year as we go through it. The only way to really get a hold on our spending, you've got to look at the major spending programs, and almost 70% of all spending comes from just a few programs: Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and then our interest on the debt. So until people start talking about that, which no one will talk about, you're going to get large deficits every single year. That's just the truth.
Yeah. That's what you do, Dan Crenshaw. You tell the truth, and I appreciate you being with us today, and that's why I have followed you since you got into Congress. I appreciate you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Always happy to be on the program. Thanks for having me.
To hear the full versions of last week's Martha Zoller shows, go to the podcast page at accesswdun.com, and you can follow me on social media at Martha Zoller.